Today it's a beautiful, festive, and classic Tres Leches Cake. Hello everybody and welcome back to my kitchen. On our agenda for today is pastel de tres leches, or three milks cake, tres leches cake. Now if you've ever had it, you know that it's a cake that is soaked with these beautiful combination of sweetened condensed milk, evaporated milk, and whole milk. And most recipes that you see out there call for a 9 by 13 baking dish. You make a single layer, soak it with the milks, and then top it with whipped cream or a kind of meringue frosting. I wanted to give you a cake that is absolutely perfect for a very special occasion. So we're going to make it in a 2-layer cake, still soak it with those wonderful milks, and then frost it with whipped cream. We're going to put fruit on it. It's going to be an absolutely beautiful version of the classic Tres Leches cake. Now, all Tres Leches cakes are made with a sponge cake base. It has to be a sponge cake so that it will soak up all of those delicious milks. And we're going to start that by separating eggs here. I've got 6 eggs that I'm separating, and I'm just going to use the very simple way of separating eggs, which is, whoops, wrong way. I'm going to get started again here in the wrong way. I almost dropped some of the white into the wrong bowl there. But we're going to just tip this egg back and forth, letting the white fall into with the rest of the 6 whites here. And then we have the yolk to go in with these yolks here. Okay, so now I'm going to add to these yolks some oil, a little bit of water, and some sugar. So we'll get all of that in there. To the measured flour, I'm adding some baking powder and salt. Then I'm going to use my whisk here to whisk the baking powder and salt into the into the flour. Then whisk all of the ingredients together that I put into the yolk bowl. And now we're going to start beating egg whites, these 6 egg whites here. Put the bowl on there. And then I'm going to use a little bit of cream of tartar. The acid of the cream of tartar will help these to stabilize. They won't start deflating so quickly. I'm going to put about a 1/4 teaspoon or so of that in there. There. And when they start to get fluffy, just starting to get like they look like beaten egg whites, I'm going to add the other half of the sugar to these whites, about a tablespoon at a time, letting them beat for 30 to 45 seconds after each addition. So you can see that they already look like beaten egg whites, but they're real soft. And that's the stage at which I'm going to start adding the sugar by the tablespoon. I just want it to dissolve in there. This will also make these egg whites very stable. After about 30, 45 seconds now, I'll add another tablespoon of sugar and continue until all of this sugar is gone. Okay, these are now to what I would call glossy, stiff peaks. And you can see that I can hold almost a completely stiff peak there. When it's got this much sugar in it, it will be a little softer than if it didn't have that. Now we're going to take the dry ingredients now and mix them into the wet ones here. And we'll just do that with a whisk, continuing to whisk around here until all of the dry ingredients are completely incorporated. Okay, so that's a kind of heavy batter, and because it's heavy like that, I am going to just stir in some of these beaten egg whites, about a 1/4 of what is here. and just stir them in to lighten the batter so that we can fold the rest of them in. But you'll see how much lighter it looks and feels just stirring that little base in there. Okay, now the next is to put about half of these beautiful egg whites on top here and go through the motion of folding. So you're starting at the side, scooping down to the bottom, and then sort of folding what you raise up over everything else. And we want to go with that motion until we don't see any more streaks of white. Now there you have it, your sponge cake batter. That wasn't very hard at all, but it does require a couple of baking techniques there. Okay, now we're going to talk about the pans. This recipe is for 9-inch cake pans, and here's what I did with these 9-inch cake pans. I use a little oil sprayer like this, and I just sprayed oil into them. Then I use my fingers just to rub it up around the edge here. And then I cut 2 pieces of parchment to go down in the bottom here. So they're already prepared and ready to go. And I'm going to divide this batter between the 2 pans. It's very, very fluffy and light. And we want to do everything that we can to keep that beautiful lightness. So I always put the bowl right up over where I'm putting it there and not let it fall very far because I don't want to deflate this batter at all. And then very gently, I'm going to spread it out and flatten it a little bit. It'll flatten of its own accord in the oven. And I've got my oven set to 350 degrees. And I'm going to slide them into the oven. So here we go down here. And I'm going to slide them in. I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. It may take a few more minutes than that. But I'll show you what it looks like when these are done just right. Okay, I think that we are ready with these cakes. Let me show you what I'm looking for here. So they're beautifully golden on the top. I want them to be springy in the middle, and that's what I'm feeling, that they're really springy there. I'm gonna let these cool for about 10 minutes or so in the pan, then run a knife around the edge, turn them onto a cooling rack, peel off the parchment paper, and let them come to room temperature. Okay, the cakes are cool now, and I like to get the crumbs off the edge because that'll make it easier for me to be able to frost it without dragging those crumbs into the whipped cream frosting that we're going to do for this. Now, the easiest frosting for this kind of cake, and it's actually the one that I like the most because it emphasizes the dairy in it, is just plain old whipped cream. So I've got a couple of cups of whipping cream, very cold whipping cream, in my mixer here, and I'm just going to start beating that. We want to get it to completely stiff peaks. They'll look stiffer than the egg whites with the sugar beaten into them. There, okay, so I'll set these guys to the side a little bit here. You can see how many crumbs came off of this. So I'm going to get those guys out of here. Some people like to save these little crumbs and use them as a garnish on other cakes. You just dry them out in, say, a toaster oven or a regular oven, and they'll be beautiful little crunchy bits to sprinkle over a cake. Okay, so now we have to make the 3 milks, and I'm doing it very, very classic here, and I'm going to do it in a blender jar So I have here the evaporated milk, and this one always has the top that comes off like that. So we're going to put that into our blender jar here. And then the second one is the sweetened condensed milk. Now, if you think about the flavors that we have going here, the evaporated milk has a slightly caramel-like note. The sweetened condensed milk has a very caramely flavor to it, and that's going to provide all of the sweetness that we have, because remember, our cake doesn't have a lot of sweetness to it. This stuff is hard to get out, but you have to be very careful to make sure you get all of it out. So you're going to not just pour it out, but scrape it out with a spatula. And as soon as we get as much as we possibly can out of that. It takes a while because it's such sticky stuff. But it's got a very, very special flavor, one that I really love. And it's one of the things that makes Three Milks Cake, Tres Leches Cake, really taste like Tres Leches Cake. I have 3/4 of a cup of whole milk. Sometimes people like to put a little heavy cream in here, and you could play around with that if you want to make it richer. I think it's plenty rich with the sweetened condensed milk. And then we've got some vanilla. I'm using the beautifully aromatic, florally aromatic Mexican vanilla, and I'll put about a teaspoon of that. Stuff is very expensive, and if you want to, you can add more. More will always be welcome in this. I did this you can do this just in a bowl with a whisk, but I'm going to do it in the blender just because that sweetened condensed milk takes a little bit of effort to blend into everything. So I'm just going to let this go. It'll only take about 10 or 15 seconds for it to all blend together. That's all we need there. And we have our 3 milks, the Tres Leches here. Okay, now let's start building this thing. You want to build it on a platter that has a little rim around it, because some of the 3 milks may ooze out at the base. So I'm going to take one of these sponge cakes. The nice thing about sponge cakes is that they don't break. So I'm going to do that there. And then I'm going to poke a bunch of holes in it just to facilitate the soaking. The nice thing about sponge cakes too is that they're really flat, as opposed to the cream butter cakes that most of us make, where you cream butter and sugar together as the first step of it. So poke a bunch of holes in it. I always say around 30 or 40 of them. I probably got more than 30 or 40 there. And then I'm going to use a ladle to start ladling the 3 milks over this thing. Now this is going to take you about 5 minutes or so per layer. So we just start pouring it on. And you have to be patient, because if you're not patient, it won't soak in evenly. Okay, look at the whipped cream. Now this is what I would call stiff whipped cream. You can take a look at that. It's the stage before it turns to butter, of course. But I want this to be stiff enough that I can really use it on the cake as a frosting. So I'm going to take about 1 cup of this and spread it all over this. Now you can see that there's just a tiny bit of the tres leches coming out at the bottom there. That means that we have thoroughly soaked that layer of the cake. That's okay, and it's expected. That's what people love about this cake, is that flavor of the 3 milks. And then I'm going to take about a little less than half of these berries. Now, this is blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, but you could use anything you want at the height of strawberry season. I'll often make this with all strawberries. That's just absolutely delicious. So now an even layer of these across here. think it can use a couple more over here. And then we're going to put the second layer of the cake over that. Now, before we do that though, let's just press these in here so that not only is it even, an even coating of them, but it's also really flat. And next goes the other layer of the cake. We'll just lay that right on top. And then we're going to even it out as well, like that. And then we go right back to the soaking that we have already done with the other layer. And this will take about the same amount of time. You go slow and steady, making sure that, oh, I think we need to poke some holes. So again, poking a skewer down in it and then start the slow and steady application of the Tres Leches. Okay, we've got both layers soaked now. If your layers, when you're putting the 3 milks on there, if they start, or either one of them starts to leak a little bit, then you know you've saturated enough. But remember that you have to go very evenly around, because if you just put it in one place, it'll start leaking out right away. You can see a tiny bit leaking on the side of this cake, but that's nothing to worry about. Just if that happens, just stop adding more of the 3 milks. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is to frost this cake with our stiff whipped cream here. I'm going to do the edges first and then go to the top of it. Our beautifully snowy looking Tres Leches cake gets a crown of all of these berries. Now, I just like to pile them on top. If you're a cake decorator, you might want to pipe a whipped cream border around here to contain all the berries. But I just think it looks so incredibly festive when you pile all of these on the top. Now, keep this in the refrigerator until you're ready to serve it. I always recommend that you make the Tres Leches cake and soak the cake the same day that you're going to serve it. And then it'll hold for several hours easily in the refrigerator. But just look at this. Look how festive this is. This is a real party cake. Okay, in just a second, I'm going to come back and show you what it looks like when you cut into it. So this is the payoff, obviously. I'm going to cut down through here, cut a piece of it, slide that out so that you can see what that looks like. If I do of course, the first piece is the hardest piece always. Let's see what we got looking here. Oh, it came out pretty good. So you get the beautiful moistness of the cake there. You see how it's soaked up all of the Tres Leches, and of course the whipped cream and the fruit and all of that. I'm not waiting another